BookTok has a problem. Hey y'all, and welcome back to my channel. I am Leah, and this is my cactus pillow that we are going to talk about BookTok with. My friend actually made this, so if you want one, I will put the link to her Instagram below so you can contact her and get your own cactus pillow. It is my favorite. But BookTok, y'all, have y'all seen this video?
Oh my god, I need this one. She books her uncle and both of his kids.
Didn't you read that on Kindle Unlimited already?
Yeah, but I need a physical copy. In this one, he's giving her back shots while drowning her in shark-infested waters.
Why do you look so excited about that?
I'm not.
So those who don't know, BookTok is a community of readers on TikTok where they share books that they love and that they recommend, and it has been a really helpful resource for a lot of people who want to get into reading. It's also been very helpful for authors, especially indie authors like myself, who have used it as a platform when traditional means have not been accessible to them. So it has been helpful all around in terms of like reading and for authors. So I do want to say that there are some good things to it, but like the videos show, there's also a lot of bad things to TikTok. Personally, as someone who has been influenced by the bookish community, I've been following bookstagrammers for about 4 or 5 years now. I mainly follow Black bookstagrammers, so I don't really have these kinds of problems. But a lot of the things that they have been saying is that the people who get uplifted and platformed, one, they're usually white, and two, they usually promote the most problematic books in existence. And so a lot of people have been pushing back against this, saying, like, why are we mad that people are reading? They're reading. Reading is good. Literacy is good. And I do agree. Reading is good. Reading is great. Reading is also propaganda. All media has a message. All media is propaganda. Reading is not exempt from that. Reading is propaganda. And so we have to look at BookTok critically, and we have to look at these books critically, because if we don't, we just be like, oh, people that read are super smart. And then we are upset that super smart people are not making super smart decisions. Like, reading does not make you super smart, because again, reading is propaganda. You could be reading extremist white supremacist propaganda, which a lot of these romances are. Romance itself is propaganda. It's all like, one day my prince will come, and when he comes, he's gonna know all of my heart's desires, and he's gonna know everything I want, and he's going to be there forever, and he's gonna know what's best for me. He's gonna do this, he's gonna do that. My life's gonna be fulfilled when I have his babies. And that's propaganda. It's patriarchal propaganda. It's something that I'm going through a divorce, and I'm like, you know what? The next man, he's going to be the one. It's propaganda that is designed for us to be with men. And so you think about the things that are in these kinds of books, the things of like, oh, maybe this man hurt your heart 7 million times, but give him one more chance and he'll get it right this time. Or maybe this guy who you're not really attracted to, if you just force yourself to be attracted to, you'll be happy with him. And all of this is propaganda in the favor of men. Romance is no exception, and I say that as a romance author. And so when people talk about BookTok and the problems behind it, I think a lot of people instantly go to smut. They're like, sex does not belong in books. Let me stop you there. Sex does belong in books, but they belong in certain books. Like, I think sex and literary fiction, fine. I think sex and romance, fine. I think those are genres where I can expect to see sex. There are some times where I'm reading a book and I'm like, now why is this sex in here? What purpose does this serve? Like, why are we here? Why are we here? We should be somewhere else. But as an erotic romance author myself, I love smut. I think it should be in our stories. I think it should not be used just to fill plot. I think we should use it meaningfully, because I think sex is meaningful in our lives. So I think we should be having meaningful sex scenes. And I think in a country that is constantly trying to get rid of access to sex ed, that's constantly trying to blur the lines of consent, that's constantly trying to attack reproductive health, it is very, very, very important that our sex scenes be used as propaganda for good, right? Because the current propaganda that we see on booktok is women fantasizing about a man pushing them up against the wall and having his way with her without her permission, and about him impregnating her against her consent. Let me tell you a story. Lord, I started reading in 2018. This is when I started reading again. And I was looking online, like, what are good books for beginning readers? This was before booktok, so I didn't have booktok to be like, here's some good books for beginning readers. I didn't have that. So I was looking online for books that were good for beginning readers. I was reading classics and I was reading like contemporary literary fiction, both by white male authors. Both of those genres, every book I read was boring. It was boring. I hated myself the whole time I read it. I was like, ugh, maybe reading isn't for me. And then I read Paul Beatty's The Sellout, and I read that in 2 days. I devoured that book. I was like, this book is so good. I love it. I want to read more books like that. And I have almost exclusively read Black authors since then. I do read BIPOC authors. Some of my favorite authors that are not Black or Mexican, I don't know why Mexican specifically, but I just keep reading books by Mexican women. And I'm like, this is amazing. I love it. So I do read BIPOC books, mainly books by Black women. But last year, I read 66 books. I read one book by a white woman. And the thing was, the premise was so good. It was such a good premise. I was like, I really want to see how this is executed. And at first I was like, I'm not reading a book by a white woman. I'm not breaking my fast. I'm not breaking my fast. But I broke it because I was just way too curious. I broke down. I bought the book. I read it. The whole time I'm tense. I'm like I know something bad is going to happen. I get to the end of the book. I almost breathe a sigh of relief. And then at the end, the woman finds out she's pregnant. Even though at the beginning she was like, I don't want to have kids. She was working with this man who was in a position of power over her. And he was initiating a sexual relationship with her. And at the end, he confessed that in the beginning, when he first saw her, he knew he had to get her pregnant. He knew he had to have sex with her, one. He knew he had to get her knocked up, even though she said that wasn't what she wanted. He had to do it. And she was happy about it. She was happy that he knocked her up, even though that wasn't what she wanted. And so we really have to think about what kind of message does that send, right? What kind of message does that send in a country where you cannot freely get an abortion? That a man can knock you up against your consent and you're just supposed to be happy about it. And what happens if you read books like that over and 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 over again? Right? What happens when we read books about men who are pushing us up against the wall and having our way with us, even though we're like, oh, I'm too shy to say yes, but this is really what I want, but I'm not going to verbalize it or give him consent? Or what happens in the real world when a man asks for our permission or our consent and it gives us the ick? What does that say about us and about what we value? I think these are the questions we have to ask ourselves. So for me, I wasn't really surprised that a lot of book talkers are coming out as white supremacist supporters because it's in their books. Their books are heavily promoting sexual violence, all kinds of violence, is heavily promoting racism. Y'all remember that Klan romance? Oh my God, I've seen a Klan romance written by a Black woman. Like, this is not just like a white woman drag. This is also an all of y'all drag that are promoting these sorts of values. And people are like, where did we go wrong? But I think a lot of people are underestimating the values of this country. This country is not pretending to be something it's not. This country is not forcing itself to be something it's not. It's unmasking, right? It's been pretending. It's unmasking. This is a country that was founded on the dual genocide of Native people and the enslavement of African people. It's not, you expected them to play nice. Like, violence is their value. Violence is their value. And so you read books about characters who are being violent to each other and they call it love. You read books where you're supposed to be in love with a clan member because he's just a morally great character. Like, sometimes I just think about the absurdity of it, and it's just like, I can't be surprised because this is my experience with reading books by white people, is like they're extremely violent, but the violence is so understated that most people just look past it. Most people don't even notice. And as a result, they're ingesting these messages that these things are normal. And then they go out into the world having this violence normalized for them, and then continue to act violently towards others because no one has ever stopped and told them, hey, you need to stop doing this. And if they do, it's too woke. It's too woke. I think a lot of people wonder where we went wrong. And honestly, it's like a lot of I'm always constantly blaming the government for rolling back public education, and the kids were left behind. The kids were left behind. They were forced to read things that they didn't want to read, and so as a result they're like, I hate reading. But now they find a book that is easier for them to read, and so now they're loving reading again. Something that I have been encouraged by is seeing the readers who start with like those kinds of books and then they expand from there, right? They expand, they start reading books by people of different backgrounds and people of different ethnicities and things like that. And then they start being like, you know what, those books that I started with were good starter books. They weren't that good. They weren't that good politically. They weren't that well written. They weren't a lot of things. And for me as a writer, I really struggle with this because I know that most adults can't read very well. I'm trying to meet readers where they're at, and I'm trying to write at a level that they can understand. At the same time, it's also hard to get help from other writers because I've had writers call one of my books, Apocalypse Still, YA style of writing, which is basically, I'm not gonna say a slur, but it's a comment on like me writing in a very straightforward type of way that can be easy to digest. But when that book went to market, readers were calling it literary fiction. And there's such this disconnect between writers and readers, right? And so there are more indie authors who don't have a lot of training, haven't really developed their craft, but they can tell a good story. I give them that. They can tell a good story. And so as a result, people are entertained and people are engaging, people are reading. People are reading mammoth books when they haven't read anything in like a decade. And so for them, they feel very accomplished and they aren't really questioning about the things that they're consuming because they're like, oh, I'm reading a book and I'm being enjoyed and titillated and stuff like that. So they're not really questioning what's going on, but they also haven't been taught to question what's going on. They just think like the only propaganda is the things that I don't agree with. And I'm like, that shows that you've been indoctrinated because everything is propaganda. Every single thing that you consume, that you watch, that you listen to, it's all propaganda. It's all meant to sway you in some direction. And you believing that it doesn't is part of the propaganda. That's why the US propaganda machine is so strong, because people don't even realize that it's happening to them. Like, there are times where I feel so strongly about something that I think it must be true. But I only think it must be true because I've been told it my entire life. That's it. And I've been told it my entire life because I live in the United States. Because I live in this country. That does not mean it's true. And so when you read these books over and over again, and they all have these very violent themes, when you read books that are constantly being like, hey, we should just forgive the man who's violent and emotionally stunted because he's just going through some things and he's really good on the inside, or he's bad for everybody else but he's good for you, right? You're the special little snowflake who's going to get good things. And then you see those people vote for a man who's like, I'm going to strip everyone's rights away. And he's like, but not mine, because I'm the special little snowflake. Me. These are the things that people are ingesting. And it's depressing. It's depressing and sad. I'm not going to lie to you. And when I think about where do we go from here, what do we do next, what do we do now, I think it's really just about using media responsibly. Like, book talk is not bad. I do want to say that book talk is not bad. Like, I have gotten some really great recommendations from it. Like, Deanna Gray, who became one of my favorite authors this year, found her books through book talk. She's an indie romance writer. She's a Black author. Natasha Bishop, and that book was going around everywhere. It was a really fun and a really good book, right? That one, we could have discussions about Black capitalism, if we're being honest. But it was also a really good book. It was a really good book. But as consumers, as readers, we have to be able to look at books critically and to look at the people who create it, because there is no separation between artists and art. An artist's life informs their art. And I think a lot of people want to not have to deal with that responsibility of vetting every single person and being like, oh, people make mistakes. Yeah, people make mistakes. Everybody's flawed. No one's perfect. At the same time, that shouldn't stop us from trying to read books that are edifying, that are empowering, that are whole. And I'm not just being like, we have to read happy books. You can read sad books too that are edifying. I love Jessamine Ward's Salvage the Bone. It is a very heartbreaking book, but there's this like layer of warmth under it. Ugh, she's such a talented writer. But things like that, like, it does not have to be, oh, you can only read happy books. Or I've read so many romance books. I love Wishful Thinking and Kiss and Spell. I will never stop recommending these books. I love them. They are so good. They're so good. And it's like whimsical Black people who are also like witches and merfolk and fae princes. And it's just like, there's so much good stuff out there. But I think a lot of it is, if you're going to use book talk, if you're going to use Instagram or any of these social media platforms to get your book recommendations, vet the authors, vet the people who are giving you that information. And that's not just for book talk, that's for all the media that you consume. I can say for me, my background, I have a degree in media and cultural theory. It is about cultural theories like race, gender, sexuality, all of that jazz, and how it shows up in our media. I was literally trained to look at media and think about what messages I'm consuming. All media. What message is being sent to me right now? What do these people want me to believe? Because that's it. Like, everything you watch is trying to inform your belief system. And you have to constantly ask those questions. What are they trying to get me to believe? What do they want me to internalize? Because you believing that there's nothing, that there is no message being sent to you, is you accepting the message. And you can accept some very dangerous things because you're not having discernment and you're not thinking. You're not thinking. That's my quick little rant on TikTok having many problems, but the real problem is just that we're platforming the wrong people. There are so many talented book talkers who are working so hard to be seen, to be heard, and no one's listening to them because they rather listen to the people who are shiny. That's the best word I have for it, who are flashier than them. And then we are like, well, I followed the flashy, charismatic person. Why? Why did I end up here? Because you weren't listening. Because you weren't thinking. And that's not a bad thing. It's just, I hope that if you've watched this video, you are aware and instead you can now listen and think and do better. And know, like, should you get rid of your books that are by problematic authors? Probably. Should you start reading books by people that are not like you? Yeah. And if you're someone who's like, oh, I've tried that, I just don't like books by people that don't look like me or come from the same backgrounds as me, ask yourself why. Why does it make you uncomfortable to hear different stories? Why does it make you uncomfortable to engage with different writing styles? Why? That's it. I think if anything, this whole like book talk controversy has just been about like asking ourselves the tough questions about what we're consuming and how to make better consumption choices. Because the thing is, I can tell you all day long, quit consuming media, just log off of TikTok. You're not gonna log off of TikTok. You want to be entertained. We all do. I'm on TikTok. I'm on TikTok. I'm on YouTube. I'm on Instagram. I'm on everything. I'm watching Netflix. I'm reading the books. I'm doing it too. I'm also consuming media, but I also constantly have to check in and being like, what message is being sent to me? Because messages are being sent. Messages aren't being sent. I'm gonna wrap this up because I just feel like I'm rambling. But this is all I have. Be very careful about the content that you're consuming. Um, if you like this video, like it and comment and subscribe. And I will see you in the next one. Bye.